kind of dialogue here today. In February 20th through 22, we'll be in New York City at the annual Rainbow Push Wall Street project. We were on Wall Street 400 years ago. This was an African burial ground on Wall Street. Mississippi and Alabama and Georgia take the rap, but New York was the port that exported cotton and imported Africans for 244 years in the port of New York. So we returned to New York this time with 55 black congressmen. We did better with Congresswoman Maxine Waters and Bass and Dan Davis and Bobby Rush. We're going back to Wall Street, demanding fairness and justice in the economic market. Say fairness and justice, the economic marketplace. Our share of hedge funds, our share of banks, our share of pension funds, our share of board seats. We want our share. Cut us in or cut it out. Put your hands together 400 years later. Well, this week, Jesse and Jackie got all famous. They were on the View Tuesday morning. They did the CBS Morning News. I'm doing the show, Reverend Al Sharpton show. You see it today on MSNBC, today on CNN. I would come home late, run upstairs and start writing and go to sleep. She wrote Jesse a letter every night. And I'm glad the letters were in good taste. Thank you. You will know Jack. Say we will know Jackie. Thank God the letters were readable. Put your hands together.
All right. Thank you all. Thank you. Thank you. We certainly love it. That was an amazing interview if you all were able to catch it. It was beautiful to see a mother's love. To see a mother's love. That's something that it can't be, nothing can compare to that. And that's what I saw when we saw Jesse Jr. and Jacqueline, Mrs. Jackson, talk about this experience that your family went through. Hello and good morning, everyone. My name is Felicia Lawrence, and I am a television co-host of The Jam. I'm a TV personality on The Jam. And that is a morning show which airs on WCIU-TV, the Jam, WCIU, the U, right here in Chicago. And so I am so excited to be here. We talk about everything, news, entertainment, politics, celebrities, literally everything and anything that people are talking about. And I'm excited to be here with you all today. I find it an honor to be sitting on stage with you all. I am a Southsider, born and raised right here in Chicago. I attended our alma mater, North Carolina A&T State University. You all can give it up for HBCUs. Aggie Pride, he's gonna say, we don't need to bring that up. He said, I'm married to a FAMU Rattler. We don't have to bring that up today. No, we love our HBCUs. So it is such a full circle moment for me to be back here with you all today and to be sitting on the stage with you all. So thank you so much for having me. We have a lot of important topics to get to. I'm sitting on the stage with giants. We've got Dr. Todd YEARY, Vice President of Rainbow Push. And we all know this historical giant sitting in the middle here. So thank you for having me here. You can give it up for Reverend Jackson. So let's talk about what's going on in Virginia right now. It's obviously reverberating around the nation. This week we saw the Virginia governor under fire for appearing in blackface. He came out last Friday, said that he was apologizing for a photo of, it was two people in this photo, which included a person in blackface and a person in a KKK robe. The next day, literally 24 hours later, after the governor apologized, he said that it wasn't him in the photo. So we definitely have a little bit of back and forth going on here. Do you think that he should resign?
Yes, he should resign because he no longer has the moral authority. He may not resign because there have been a lot of governors who had that same disposition for a long time. What strikes me, however, is that this was a photo taken 35 years ago. When we marched into Charlottesville fighting the Klan, he was on the right side with us. When Heather Heyer was killed, he was on the right side. We fought for the voter rights enforcement, he was there. Before the pull of the Robert E. Lee statue down, he was there. And 35 years later, he has to face that picture, which of course was humiliating to black people. What strikes me is, what is the threshold, Reverend YEARY, for race? The woman who's not a senator from Mississippi ran against Mike Espy, and she said she would like to sit in the front seat of a lynching. 586 blacks were lynched in Mississippi, and she sits in the U.S. Senate today, no one's picking outside her house. The governor of Florida said when he was running against Gillum that this a little monkey running. The governor of Georgia, who was the Secretary of State, took thousands of blacks off the rolls and undercut the victory that earned Stacey Abrams. So it's not just the black face in Virginia, it's the behavior across the country. And I want to go a step further, that they can wipe off their black face. We can't wipe ours off. We will deal with it. We have to live with it, and I submit to you that I think Cornel West said it best, for everybody to absorb their sins of one guy should or should not resign is almost diversion, because there's no focus on the woman from Mississippi who said she should sit in the front seat of a lynching party.
Dr. YEARY, it seems that in 2019, this should be a no-brainer question, but I think I still have to ask it because clearly we see situations like this popping up. Why is it okay not to wear blackface?
Why is it okay not to wear blackface, or why should we not wear blackface?
Why should we not wear blackface?
If we understand the history of blackface, blackface was the method by which black people were publicly ridiculed and caricatured in the period where we were trying to fight for our rightful place in the fabric of the United States citizenry. And so to mock black people in blackface in 1984, they lock it in time, but let's talk about what was happening in 1984 that should have even said then that it's not acceptable. In 1984, trying to imitate Michael Jackson, well, everybody remembers Off the Wall and the album cover. Michael Jackson was a light-skinned dude then too, so blackface would have been disconnected from the frame that the governor keeps trying to raise. But the more important thing that happened in 1984 is there was a significant historical presence of a black preacher who dared to run for president of the United States. And to miss the connection between the relevance of black pride and black power and to still caricature in blackface is problematic, and we've got to call it out for what it is in 2019.
Seems like it should be a no-brainer, but clearly it's important to make sure that that history is not forgotten and that the importance of that is still vibrating in our nation, and that now we have even younger generations that can understand why we need to remember where we come from.
There was a saying they used to use, say, sticks and stones break my bones, but talk don't bother me. Because somebody calls you the N-word does not make it so. We cannot get so sidetracked by somebody absurdly putting on blackface, forget to vote on those who vote and serve on juries. There'll be an election in Chicago, February the 26th, to determine the next mayor of the city of Chicago for 4 years. Don't focus so much on that imitation of a blackface. Take your blackface downtown and vote.
I think that's something we can all take note on.
I said face.
Take your blackface to go vote. Right, there you go. Okay.
We appreciate that. We appreciate that. So you brought up the Chicago mayoral election. Let's talk about that. We have over a dozen candidates. This is a historical election here in Chicago, and it's probably safe to assume that we're going to be down to a runoff. But who do you think it'll come down to in this race?
Very difficult to tell who it will come down to because they're very able people, but can't be one to win. When Harold ran in 1983, he led a scientific plan. We ignoring the plan. When I was a little younger and far less political, Jackie was trying to cook biscuits for me because I'm a major biscuit eater, you know. And I would say, thank you very much, but they don't taste like my grandma's biscuits, which I shouldn't have said. I shouldn't have said that, but I didn't know any better. And her biscuits, they were kind of like unleavened, though they wouldn't rise. I said, they're good, but they're hard. But I found, it was tough though. But love don't make biscuits rise. Baking powder make biscuits rise. The science. And Harold put forth a way to make biscuits. Harold said, if I do run, there'll be one person running. If there's more than two running, then it could be assigned by the man. Two, put at least 50,000 new voters on, show me that you're willing to work. And show me some, in polls, you can draw beyond just a black community. This is not a small black town. This is Chicago. And put $500,000 on the table. We followed that theory. We won by 2 points in a 3-person race. So my fear is that if our vote is too dispersed, we could mess around and not come in number 2. The fact we have the numbers to come in number 1. We follow the science of voting, not just the emotion of dispersing our vote.
So we're splitting up, the black vote is being split right now. Dr. YEARY, what kind of strategy do you think needs to be set in place? Obviously, Reverend Jackson just touched on it, but how do we bring this together? How do we unite it? Obviously, this was the formula that got Harold Washington elected into the mayor's office. How do we fix this?
We live in the period and the culture of personality, right? So we run elections devoid of substance. So the conversation is not who's running, but what's on the agenda of those who are running. And if our issues are not included in their agenda, then that helps us to avoid the trap of the cult of personality. There's name recognition on the ballot. There's the sense of family entitlement on the ballot. There are folks who have been in other roles in government now trying to run for mayor. At the end of the day, the mayor as the executive of a city, the city in the state of Illinois, has an important role to play. And the question is there an inclusive agenda that addresses the concerns? Public safety, what are we going to do about unconstitutional policing in the city of Chicago? Who's going to lead the Chicago Police Department? What are we going to do about public health issues? What are we going to do about economic development, equity, and inclusion? Not just talking about putting black faces on the job. Let's put green money in black pockets and make sure that we get to an economic empowerment strategy. That's why Reverend does Wall Street and the things that he's been talking about over and over again. Because if you have diversity but you don't have inclusion, what you have is a different form of blackface with no real political empowerment attached to it.
Meet me in New York, February 21st, 2021, 22, because we saw the Super Bowl game last Monday, and 75% blacks on both sides of the ball. We're going to be picking cotton balls to footballs. Stadium is public funded, but owned by whites, because we don't have. We're going to deal with the formula. How do you build stadiums in New York? We don't own. We have 2 black football coaches. We had 7. Now it's down to 2. We own no football teams. We should own the next 2 football teams as a demand. We own no black baseball team, only 1 basketball team. So now is the time to move from basketballs and footballs and cotton balls to economic ownership and justice. That's what the Wall Street Conference is about in New York, February 20. Go to your website today, meet me there.
Certainly, and we're going to touch more on that. Just so people know, February 26th is the Chicago mayoral election. Early voting across the city starts Monday. Don't wait till February 26th. Let's make sure we get it in on time and early. And who will be Chicago's next mayor? All the people will decide. You all sitting here will decide. So let's talk about this economic conference that's supposed to be happening, a Wall Street Project Economic Summit, February 20th through the 22nd, as you just mentioned. How important is that? Because that was Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s next venture that he was taking on, the Poor People's Campaign, and that was where you have picked up the torch for the last 50 years.
The fourth stage of our struggle. The first stage was to end legal slavery, 244 years. Second stage, to end legal Jim Crow, where 5,000 blacks were lynched in Jim Crow. Third stage, the right to vote. But you can be out of slavery and segregate and vote and starve to death without access to capital, industry, technology, and deal flow. We want our share of board seats, our share of C-suites, our share of education, our share of hedge funds, our share of pension funds, our share of jobs, our share of lending and investment. And to this time, we were there 400 years ago. We go back with 55 black congressmen. Maxine Waters is going to speak on she's chair of the Finance Committee now. Bob Rush will be there, he has telecommunications. Dan Davis heads of infrastructure from Illinois. Congresswoman Bass, who's international. The Congressman from Mississippi, Benny Thompson, heads up the Secret Service. And so the fact is, we go back to Wall Street 400 years later with 55 black congressmen, 30 Latinos and 20 Asians. We have the power this time to go forward by hope and send Trump back to selling real estate.
Dr. YEARY, tell us, obviously we know this starts in the voting booth in terms of who we have to advocate for us on our behalf, but what else? What's the next step of this? Obviously we have an economic summit, but how do we pick up the torch from here?
Well, Felicia, I'm glad you raised that question because many disaffected communities wonder whether voting still works, and I think it's because we put voting out on an island by itself as the single remedy. But once the election's over, the people still have a voice. They still have a way and a mechanism to encourage their elected officials to follow through on what they campaigned on. And so what has to happen, and one of the things that Reverend pushes us on, is to make sure that we mobilize and take action. It's one thing to theorize, it's another thing to mobilize. We've got to get out in the streets. We've got to show up at city council meetings, PTA meetings, school board meetings. We got to ride down to Springfield or wherever your state capital is. And as you show up in the hearing rooms, that's when you begin to influence policy. Many folks are talking about the Broadway show Hamilton. And one of the key songs on the Hamilton soundtrack is The Room Where It Happens. The room where it happens is the committee room where every bill gets heard. And if you don't have a seat in the room where it happens, it's going to tell you that your issue's not going to make it to the agenda for them to even talk about it in that room. So you've got to make sure that once you vote, you still have to engage those who get elected and make sure that they deliver on the issues that matter to you and your community. Otherwise, you are signing up for whatever they bring back to you.
So if you buy groceries every week and don't cook in the meantime, it made no sense to buy the groceries in the first place. See, if I buy groceries every weekend and don't cook in the between time, buying groceries was a waste of time.
Reverend has a way of breaking it down for us, doesn't he?
He has a lot of eating examples. I'm not sure why that is, but
A Carolina man there, a Carolina man. All right, let's talk about fentanyl. Okay, there are so many topics that we could talk about. Let's talk about fentanyl. I think this is something that kind of gets pushed down on the list.
$1 billion worth of drugs, enough to kill 57 million people, and Trump wants to build a wall. El Chapo has an underground tunnels under the fence. The drugs came off of a truck coming through the port.
Reverend Jackson's talking about one of the largest drug busts of fentanyl that happened this week, and it crossed through a legal port in our U.S.-Mexico border.
Drove come through airports, seaports, and roads and tunnels. And so Trump's monument to himself will not solve. I'm glad that NASA is standing up.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that wall a little bit right now. So we just had the State of the Union from our president this Tuesday. 76% of viewers found that his State of the Union address was actually one that was favorable. To me, it sounded like it was a campaign speech. That's exactly what it sounded like. Do you think President Trump has a chance of being reelected in 2020?
He has a chance. We will determine that. We won the last one by 3 million. If we had voted our numbers, say if we had voted our numbers in Georgia, North Carolina, Milwaukee, Philadelphia, and Detroit, he wouldn't want. So he can win again if we don't pull our weight. If we pull our numbers, we have the power to retire him. China cannot determine the next American president. Not France. So we have the power. China does not have. Japan does not have. Europe does not have. We have the power to determine the next president. In fact, one of us can be the next president.
So Dr. YEARY, he was still vowing to get this wall built in this State of the Union address. He's still pushing forward. We just had the longest government shutdown in U.S. history, 35 days. Friday, this upcoming Friday is the deadline. We had a temporary resolution that stopped the shutdown after 35 days, and this Friday we could be facing the same thing again, and it doesn't seem like lawmakers have gotten any closer to a resolution or a compromise or something like that. We could be facing another shutdown. Do you think we'll ever see this wall, or what do you think will happen to bring our lawmakers together?
If there is no outrage from the people, there is no incentive.
Say that again.
If there's no outrage from the people, there is no incentive for the lawmakers to come together. At the end of the day...
You mean if 800,000 people march on Washington, they'll get their paycheck?
800,000 federal workers were affected in this shutdown.
If the 800,000 disaffected workers marched on their government offices, every elected official has an office in the district that they serve. You may not be able to make it to D.C., but you can make it downtown. If you show up at that office downtown, it's going to make local news. If it makes local news, every elected official reads the local news from the state that they represent. And if you make local news, you can have national impact and change the dynamics for how they handle this wall situation.
Let me express my thanks for this format today, WCIU.
Thank you for having me.
I want you who are watching me today around the country, I want you to join Rainbow Push. We need your help. We're doing research. We're fighting the fight in Virginia and Mississippi and Georgia. We need your support to make it happen. We're going to fight blackface and black marginalization, wherever it manifests itself. We're going to register ourselves, and we're going to stand up. This week, go to your, I guess, called Amazon. Bezos ain't scared, is he? Bezos called National Enquirer saying, go to Amazon, order the book, written by Jackie, Letters to a Son in Prison. Put your hands together. Let me express my thanks to you.